Hello everyone, welcome back to Music Appreciation. Looking forward to what we're going to talk about today. We're going to continue looking at our introduction to different musics around the world. We've talked about Cameroon, we've talked about Mexico. Today we're going to talk about China. The music of China, specifically Peking opera, and we're also going to talk about heterophony as well. Our subject question for today is, what is one of the musics native to the people of China, and what is its significance as a type of musical expression? Once again, recapping what we've been talking about with perceptive listening. Remember, perceptive listening is the ability to listen to a piece of music and describe what is in it, which is why we're going to talk about means, expression, and order, where our means is what is the source of the sound? What is making the sound that you are hearing? Could be singers, instruments, whatever. What is in the song that is making the sound that you are hearing? Could be guitars, violin, piano, orchestra, singers, whatever is making the sound is the means. And the expression is, what is the song trying to communicate? What message is the song trying to put out? What are the lyrics trying to get the listener to think about? And if the song doesn't have lyrics, then what kind of mood or feeling or impression is the song trying to give on the listener? That is the expression. And the order is, how is this song laid out? What are the individual parts of the song and what order are they in? So verses, choruses, bridges, solos, what is in it and what order are they in? I've said this before, but if you go to Genius Lyrics and you look up a song, it will have the lyrics, but it will also have headings that tell you what part of the song it is. So it would have a verse and the lyrics, then it would say chorus and have the lyrics for the chorus, and etc., etc. So that's a good resource to get used to identifying what part of a song is a verse, chorus, bridge, etc. So same as we did with Cameroon and Mexico, we're going to talk about the country a little bit before we actually talk about the music of that country. So we're going to talk about China a little bit. So China is one of the world's largest and oldest countries. It's incredibly rich in literature and arts, and traditional Chinese art, especially very old, like ancient Chinese art, is usually an expression of religious belief, and Chinese art is some of the oldest art in the world. A religion called Confucianism focuses on the teachings of a philosopher named Confucius, and according to Confucius, appreciation for music was part of one's development as a person. You could not be a fully developed, fully functioning person in society unless you had an appreciation for the art of music. During the 6th century, so the 500s, a new wealthy middle class in China developed a combination of music and theater that is now called Chinese opera. And public performances of this kind of opera was all over China. There were hundreds of different styles that developed over time, from dramas, romances, tragedies, etc., etc. Tons of different styles of this Chinese opera. Then in the 19th century, so the 1800s, a number of these theater styles were combined into a single style in the city of Peking. Peking is now the city of Beijing. They changed the name. This style of opera is called Peking opera. So it was this special combination of different styles into one style, and it happened in the city of Peking, so they called it Peking opera. Peking opera is an art that combines an orchestra with speaking, singing, acrobatic martial arts, and pantomime. If you don't know what pantomime is performing or communicating with expressions or music, kind of like a mime, where there would be a sound effect and a person would react to it. Think like old cartoons also do a lot of pantomime as well. But Peking opera has a range of singing that is a lot higher in pitch than in Western opera. Western opera meaning classical music opera, European opera, the kind of opera we would think about when we hear opera. That is what I mean by Western opera. So Western operatic singers let their sound resonate in their chests. It's called using their chest voice. That's how the opera singer that we listened to at the beginning of the semester was able to get this really giant, loud, resonant voice, is because he let that sound resonate in his chest cavity, and it was a giant sound. But Peking opera performers resonate their sound in their head cavity and their sinuses. And they have a very nasally tone quality, very similar to that of, if you remember the Blink-182 singer that we talked about when we talked about timbres. Their sound is a lot more of that kind of a sound, where their sound sounds like they're coming out of their nose and has this really shrill, thin kind of quality. That is the kind of sound quality that a Peking opera singer has. And I'm not trying to say that one is any better than the other, but Western opera has a certain way of singing that is native to it, and Peking opera has a way of singing that is native to it. The accompanying instrument ensemble sits to the right of the performers in full view of the audience. This is very different from Western opera, where if you were to go to an opera house to listen to a Western opera, the orchestra would be hidden. It would be off to the side or under the stage, somewhere where they're not supposed to be within the view of the audience. Normally in a Western opera, the instruments are meant to be heard and not seen. However, in Peking opera, they're in full view of the audience. They're just off to the side of the stage where they can be seen in full view of the audience. There are loud cymbals, gongs, there's drums, there's clappers that try to accompany the movements of the actor. Remember that pantomime thing, reacting to sound effects? The singers are also accompanied by string instruments and a larger lute. A lute is very similar to a small harp. A larger lute accompanies females, a smaller lute accompanies the males. And the music in Peking opera with all these instruments going on is heterophonic. We've talked about homophonic in the past, but now we're going to talk about heterophonic. Heterophony is a musical texture that occurs when performers are singing or playing the same melody, but each in its own appropriate way according to the voice or instrument. So what I mean by this is that if you remember back to homophony, where everyone that was performing the melody was performing the exact same melody. There was only one melody going on the whole time. If one person was singing the melody, or if 20 people were singing the melody, they were all singing the exact same melody. Now, heterophony is different than that. Heterophony is if there are 3 people singing the melody, they're singing kind of the same melody, but each one is doing it just a little different than the other. So there's different melodies going on, all kind of melding together. And this clip here that I've linked it's a clip of an Indian song, but it is heterophony, where the singer and the sitar are doing nearly the same melody, but there's differences here and there where they're not exactly the same the whole time. So go ahead and take a second and listen to that. I will warn you, if you're not used to listening to Indian music, it's going to sound weird, but try to listen for those melodies, that the 2 melodies that are playing at the same time are not the exact same. There's a little different, and it gives it a very weird sound that is pretty native in heterophony. So go ahead and take a listen to that. So that song sounds pretty weird because most of the music that we're used to listening to is homophony. We're used to listening to music that has one melody and everything else supports it. So when things that are heterophonic come in, it kind of messes with our heads a little bit because we're not used to listening to that kind of thing. Something I do want to talk about real quick that will hopefully help you guys understand what I'm saying a little bit better. So homophony is what we talked about before, where everyone's playing the same melody. And then heterophony is what we just talked about, where the people that have the melody aren't always doing the same melody. So I want to break it apart a little bit because they're very similar, but I want to show you how they're different. So phony, that suffix means sound. So we're going to put that off to the side a little bit and not worry about it right now. So the prefix of the words are different. So the prefix homo means the same. So in this case, it means same sound. Everyone that is performing the melody is playing the same melody. Now, hetero, that prefix means different. So if you put it together, it means different sound. So everyone that is playing the melody is playing a different melody. That's how I was able to memorize what these mean, because homo, that prefix, means the same. So everyone that's performing the melody is performing the same melody. But hetero means different. So everyone that is performing the melody is doing it just a little different. So that's the difference in homophony, which we've talked about previously, and heterophony, which we're introducing now. Moving on with Chinese opera. Chinese opera stories are normally taken from Chinese history and folklore. So if there's a fairy tale in Chinese mythology, that might get turned into a Chinese opera, or a legend of some general that fought valiantly in a battle, that might get turned into a Chinese opera. So even though Chinese opera developed as a form of entertainment, you can still see a lot of Confucian values. So things like patriotism, loyalty, fidelity, respect for elders, respect for those that are in authority. These are all things that Confucianism teaches, but it's also a lot of themes that are embedded into Chinese opera. The cast of a Chinese opera has many different characters. There's ancient bearded men, flirtatious girls, aspiring students, women warriors, all kinds of different archetypes of certain kinds of people you could find in a society. Generals and kings were presented as larger than life, giant, big, just amazing figures, and common folk were represented by clowns. And the usual goal was to entertain, but it also had the goal of educating, where you could use entertainment to teach a lesson to whoever the audience is. So wrapping up what we talked about today, we talked about the music of China, specifically Peking opera, and we also introduced the concept of heterophony. Your assignment for today in Schoology is going to be an assignment comparing and contrasting an example of a Western opera piece and an example of a Peking opera piece, where one is going to have the chest voice, very broad, open, loud kind of singing, and the other one is going to have more of a nasally, kind of thin sound to their voice. One is going to have the orchestra hidden where you can't see, and the other one is going to have the instrumentalist just full up on stage playing gongs and making sound effects for the singers. Then one of them is going to have a very elaborate stage design, and another one is going to be very simple but descriptive for the scene that they are playing in. And I want you guys to try to think through these similarities and differences, because remember what we talked about before, you can learn about something based on if you can take an element and compare and contrast it between two different things, you're able to better describe each of those things. So if I want you to talk about the musical style that is used, well, if you talk about the musical style of a Peking opera, you'll be describing that. But if you talk about the musical style of a Western opera, you'll also be able to describe that. And that's the goal here, is to have you be able to talk about and describe parts of each while understanding how they either compare or contrast with each other. So as always, if you have any questions, please email me. I'll do whatever I can to help you. Make sure you do your assignments in Schoology, because I use that for your grades as well as your attendance. If you have any questions, please get up with me. Have a good day.